Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to today's SIPS Download webinar. Delighted to have you with us this afternoon. I'm James Moore, editor at SIPS Download, and I'll be hosting the session and facilitating any questions that come in today. So what are we talking about? Well, we're talking all things supplier contracts. As you can see from our title, we're going to hear how better contract compliance and auditing can help you get a handle on your spend, and also how you can unlock hidden value. As we know, and we've talked about across a number of webinars this year and in lots of reports and also articles, if procurement can grasp these kinds of opportunities, it really helps to show the value of the work you do to your business and directly influence organizational performance. We'll identify some common contract compliance issues, the role audits can play in unlocking long-term strategies for more efficient spend management and renewals, and also how AI is playing an increasingly critical role in elevating all of this and helping you do more with less. We're joined by the PRGX team, and thank you to them for supporting today's webinar. And we're also looking forward to showcasing a real-world example from the John Lewis Partnership about their own contract compliance journey. So a really nice mix of theory and practical today. I'll introduce our speakers from the team very shortly, but first, a couple of housekeeping points to make sure you're comfortable using the platform. If you want to watch us in full screen, you can do, but you'll just need to minimize to use the Q&A function and answer a few polls that we have for you today. And I would absolutely encourage you to answer those polls and send any questions you have in to our speakers. Look, let us know your responses in the polls, and it helps us personalize the webinar a little bit more. And equally, ask those burning questions that you have, and I'll put them to our expert speakers today. If there's anything we can't answer, we can always come back to you at a later date. Just put them through in that Q&A box on your screen. It should be just below me in the video player, and that's also roughly where the polls will pop up today when we bring them up. And they'll come through to me, and then we'll put them through to the speakers towards the end of the session. All we'd ask is to please keep them relevant to the discussion, and if your question is directed at a particular speaker, please let me know. It just makes my life a little bit easier. And finally, today's session is being recorded. I know we always get questions about that. So it is being recorded, so you will be able to watch back afterwards. If you have any connection issues, you have to drop off for an urgent meeting, or equally, if you want to share with a friend or a colleague who might find interesting, you can do so after the session. So you'll get an email to let you know. But that is enough for me. We'll get going and introduce the real stars of the show today. So firstly, we have Alan Bolam, Senior Manager for Audit Operations at PRGX. Hi, Alan. Do you just want to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background and expertise?
Hi, James. Hi, everyone. My name is Alan. As James says, I'm a senior manager with operations at PRGX. I partner with clients in the retail, commercial, financial, pharmaceutical sectors, to name a few. I make the such sure supply contracts are delivering what they should. I've worked in audit for 25 years, passionate about working with our partners, developing audit programs and delivering value and long-term improvements to reduce financial leakage. And I'm here today to share insights and look forward to today's discussion.
Fantastic. Joining us from sunny Leeds in the UK, I believe. And we're also delighted to have Amit Dhingari, Chief AI Officer at PRGX. Amit, do you want to say hello and just introduce yourself?
Hi, all. My name is Amit Dhingari. I'm the Chief AI Officer at PRGX. I've been with the company for about 18 months now, but I've been in the AI space for 20 years. And today I'm going to talk about one of the AI tools that we have built for our contract compliance team called Contract Insights. So happy to be here.
Fantastic. Welcome. And finally, last but no means least, welcome to Keith Rosser, Contract Manager at John Lewis Partnership, to this session. For those who don't know, John Lewis Partnership are the UK-based organisation behind the Waitrose and the John Lewis retail stores. So big name here in the UK. But Keith, I'll let you sort of introduce yourself and a bit about your role as well.
Hi, thank you, James. I'm Keith Rosser. I'm a contract manager. I like to consider myself a contract and service development manager, and that's why perhaps I'm here today looking at the services we provide and can we develop them and take them forward. I've been with the John Lewis Partnership for 12 years, 10 years of which I've had responsibility for the PRGX contract, and that's evolved year after year. And the last couple of years, contract compliance is an area that I've become interested in. My contract portfolio is profit recovery and inventory integrity services, all areas where there's a lot of improvement in the marketplace, a lot of opportunities in the marketplace, be it AI or other things as well. And we may get to talk about some of those later. So I'm pleased to be here today.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all. We've got a really great panel of lots of different areas of expertise around contracts today. Look, it's an increasingly kind of complex sort of area that procurement and supply chain professionals are having to get to grips with, and SIPS members particularly. I think what we'll do is we'll come to some questions sort of later on in the session. We've got some presentation slides initially to kind of share a little bit about that John Lewis story, as I said. But Alan, I think if we start with you here, contract management, increasingly important part of what procurement do, especially when supply chains partnerships are getting more complex. It so often lies hand in hand, I think, with not just keeping an eye on performance and SLAs, but also in kind of long-term supply relationships. So what are the biggest challenges that procurement face? What are the biggest challenges in ensuring kind of contract adherence and compliance in your view? And I guess how can organizations turn those risks into opportunities? And I think we'll bring up a slide here that you can talk to as well.
Yeah, thank you, James. Yeah, so every organization works differently, but one thing is constant. There's contracts absolutely everywhere, and they're often not delivering what we expect. So I guess let's take a moment to step back and look at today's environment. Procurement and contract compliance have never been more complex. We're dealing with huge volumes of agreements, intricate supplier relationships, and shifting business needs. And they're all contributing to a landscape with both risk and opportunity. So if you add inflationary pressures to that and global uncertainties, margins are getting squeezed at both ends. So procurement teams, I guess you face a perfect storm. There's supply chain delays, there's talent shortages, tight budgets, limiting effective oversights of contracts. And why does that matter? I think these numbers here just really demonstrate that. You've got external supplier costs, typically around 60 to 75% of revenues. So small inefficiencies that have major impacts. Poor contract management can cost up to 9% of your bottom line, while excellence can add an 8%. That's a 17-point swing. That's absolutely significant. So I guess here's the challenge, I guess. Let's acknowledge that contracts are complex, and complexity brings risk. So while contracts are designed to help business control costs and protect against volatility, the intricate nature of these agreements means that, things don't always go as planned. And even well-written agreements fail if compliance isn't enforced. Hidden inefficiencies, different interpretations of terms, they all lead to missed opportunities, and they're common. And compliance isn't casual. It demands expertise and capacity to dig deep into transactions, data, and insights. They're absolutely key. Renegotiation provides an absolutely strategic opportunity to close those gaps, realign intent, embed compliance, and strengthen future processes. It's a major area. Finally, I guess effective management goes beyond compliance, optimizing procurement and AP processes, recovering losses from non-compliance, building stronger supplier relationships. These improvements lead to a more efficient, beneficial long-term partnership, driving the overall business success. So in short, focus on compliance, use renegotiation to drive improvement, understand what's really happening, not just servicing the contracts. That's how we protect the margin and drive growth. So contracts should safeguard us against volatility. That's what they're there for. But unmanaged complexity creates risk, and risk can hit the bottom line.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you. And I think, you talk there, it's the perfect storm. And we've seen that there's a real challenge. And we've called one of our major reports this year, SIPS reports, the cool heads in the storm. So procurement, and I'm looking at you here, Keith, are those cool heads and the ones managing these complexities. And I think you talk well to the point that compliance is kind of the start, I guess. And if you can do compliance well, you can go well beyond that and start to bring innovation in, build those supplier partnerships and relationships up, and really deliver kind of extra value, which I think is really, really interesting. I think really important scene setter for why we're sort of discussing what we're discussing today. I think it's a good time to launch our first poll, actually, just to kind of assess the maturity of the audience. So please do, as I say, it should appear just below me on the screen there. You'll be able to see the question on the presentation slides, but to answer it, just go below me in the video player and just click your preferred answer. Does your organization have a well-established process for achieving best-in-class supplier contract compliance and performance? 4 responses: absolutely, we have a roadmap and we're seeing improvement. It's a challenge and we have a way to go, or we don't even know the right questions to ask. So let us know what your thoughts are. Keith, I'd love to ask you, as our resident practitioner in the room today, what would be your response to that poll?
Well, we're a mix of two, really. We've made a good start, but it's a challenge, and we have a way to go. Uh, we're developing a roadmap. We know where we want to go for this year and well into next year, but there's so much more to do, and perhaps we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Fantastic, thank you. We'll keep that open a little bit longer, but at the moment, top result is exactly what you said. It's a challenge, and we have a way to go here. So I think that's the response from most of those on the call today. So thank you for sharing, and please do keep sending your responses in. Actually, just refreshed and had a few more. Still, 60% is a challenge, and we have a way to go. 33% we have a roadmap, and we're seeing improvement. And 7% we don't even know the right questions to ask. So nobody feels like they're absolutely in control of this, which I think is interesting, and we can maybe come back to those results a little bit later on. Alan, obviously this is a challenge for many, as we've seen from those poll results. So let's bring you back in, take a step back. What do we mean by contract compliance in the first place? Why does it matter so much in today's supplier buyer environment, and what kind of risk can doing it well kind of helps to mitigate, and the benefits that it can bring? Can I ask you to kind of talk to this a little bit for a few moments?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can move to the next slide. Perfect. So what is contract compliance? I mean, there's a textbook answer, and I guess simply they put it, it's making sure that everyone sticks to what was agreed, terms, conditions, the deliverables, I guess the whole package in that contract. It means checking what's negotiated is delivered, financials are accurate, your rates, your charges, your discounts, supplier meets performance standards, your SLAs, your KPIs, risks are managed, and opportunities to save or improve are spotted and acted upon. It's not just about looking back again, it's about fixing mistakes. It's also making contracts work better for the future. So that's the textbook bit. And I always have the challenge when people say, what do you do for a job? And I try and explain it, and that doesn't wash. So I always try and put a bit of an analogy into it, and define how it actually works. And my analogy is about imagining your supply contracts are like a car. So on the surface, everything looks fine. It's signed, it's running, the supplier's delivering. But just like a car, I guess what really matters is what's happening under the bonnet. And contract compliance is like being the mechanic, the financial mechanic. You lift the bonnet, you check the engine, and make sure every part is doing what it's supposed to do according to the manual. And in our case, I guess the manual here is the contract, the MSA, and all the different bits that go alongside during the duration of the contract. You don't just assume it's working because it's moving forward. You verify that it's working correctly. And I guess procurement, contract owners, they regularly put fuel in. They regularly top up the oil when needed to keep the contract working. But when you take it for its service, you'll see things maybe leaking that need adjusting. Parts aren't performing as they should. And what appears to be a car running fine needs work to make sure it's performing to its, I guess, its full potential. And sometimes what you find in the bonnet is really surprising. I mean, just to give an idea, I've seen contracts where agreed discounts are never applied. Grey margin is plentiful on contracts, especially where suppliers state they're running on very low margins. And also where charging for service is being passed through, which is specifically and exclusively outside of the contract requirements. So, and typically, what we usually find is no malicious agenda. It's just oversight. Contracts go over a long time, but it just adds up. So, I guess, yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing. That's what contract compliance is when I try and define it to people and explain what I do and what we do. I guess the next question on the back of that is how we build a program for contract compliance, James. And I guess typically how we do that is we build contract programs with clients, usually by identifying which suppliers to audit. And that is on looking at spend, complexity, and market insights. Where's the money going? How tricky the contract is? What do we know about that supplier or sector? Where do we think there may be potential for leakage and strengthening? The larger the spend, the greater complexity within the contract, and our knowledge where things may go wrong helps us identify opportunities for audit as a kind of foundation and initial engagement. But I guess it's not just about those numbers either. And as time goes on, other opportunities do come to sight, pop up. Maybe procurement operations spot a red flag and we're there to support and help. Or a contract's coming to an end and they want to know how it's actually performed before going out to tender. Or sometimes it's just a kind of a good feeling. Someone says it doesn't feel right and we dig into it. Or where we're negotiating, let's make sure we're starting from a position of knowledge. Let's do an audit. It's in the contract. Let's follow through with that. And I guess the results do speak for themselves in that we do recoveries of retrospective amounts over previous years. That's the foundation of the review. We're looking back of the performance. That's overcharges, missed discounts, grey margins, incorrect rates, rebates, anything that's a financial element attached to it in the contract. And because our audits start at a certain point in time, we then have a period of time that we're not auditing. So any findings that we have historical, we can roll it in year and get real-time in-year benefit for clients. And also we can help prevent future leaking by closing gaps in the contract, strengthening clauses, ensuring previous non-compliant practices cease. And that gives, and on top of that, we give procurement real insight how contracts are performing and drive incremental value past and future. So I guess it's not just about the money, also it's about confidence. When procurement knows the contract is being followed, you can negotiate better, manage supplies more effectively, and I guess you can sleep a little easier at night as well, of course. So our programs bring together a wide range of stakeholders, different categories. We share all our knowledge and work through that. And internally, we often see from that, we have a bit of a halo effect that goes on where the positive impact of our reviews and the benefits that we start to show and deliver interests other categories who maybe at first were kind of reticent to join in or wanted to see what was happening, and that opens up whole exciting new areas for us. It's a great example of how collaboration and insight can drive a big broader success. James, when we move to the next slide, I think we can move on a bit about why I think contract compliance matters as well. So when we talk about contract compliance, it's easy to focus on the financial wins, recovering lost margin, preventing overcharges, securing the value that was negotiated. I mean, these are critical and deliver absolute real gains without a doubt. But compliance can go beyond those numbers as well. It protects the original intent of your agreements. I guess one of the things we do say is contracts are, not for like 3 months, 6 months. They tend to be for 5 years, 3 years, 10 years. So as roles change and suppliers shift, the intent gets diluted. Without active management, gaps and inefficiencies just creep in. And clarity absolutely matters. The misaligned terms lead to disputes, overcharges, and friction. Keeping everyone aligned avoids, I guess, unnecessary costs and also strengthens relationship. If you're all on the same page, going towards the same target, you're all working together as a team. Data integrity is essential. When we start audits, we often find getting the data can be a challenge, but also, without accurate contract data, how can you track performance and enforce terms becomes almost impossible. So reliable data powers audits and continuous improvement. So that really brings that to the forefront as well. And finally, I guess actions count. So without visibility and active management, you risk margin leakage and weakened partnerships. In action doesn't just hurt your financial, it can erode trust over time. So you need to be all over it, really. So from my side, contract compliance isn't a tick box exercise. It's a strategic tool. It protects value, improves relationships, enables smarter decisions. It's again back to the analogy. It's about lifting the bonnet, running the diagnostics, and making sure everything works as it should. So when we get this right, procurement delivers lasting value today and for the future as well. And I guess move to the next slide there, James. That'd be perfect. Thank you. And now that we've got that kind of contract compliance matters, we understand what that's about now. When negotiations on the table, I guess there's a few practical steps that we've identified that are really basic, which I thought I'd share today as well. I mean, getting the language right, contracts succeed or fail on clarity. That's the most important thing when we're doing contract compliance audit. And ambiguous wording leads to billing errors and misaligned expectations. Align both parties. Writing the contract isn't enough. Everything must understand it. Define financial mechanics clearly, markups, pass-throughs. I mean, examples are great. If you've got examples to put in a contract, that takes away any ambiguity. We know exactly how you're going to work it out and what should happen. Ensure accountability. Let's control the contract and every change. Store agreements and secure central repositories. How often do we find that contracts on there when we come and ask for them? We go to the suppliers and sometimes they don't have them. It's kind of, where is that document floating in the system? That's important. And embedding governance as well. Schedule regular reviews, track your SLAs and KPIs. For critical suppliers, I'd say governance isn't optional. It's kind of critical. They're the big suppliers. You should be all over that as well. And monitoring, compliance isn't a one-off. It's ongoing. Keep communication flowing. Schedule regular reviews through the contract life cycle. Balance supplier profitability with transparency. Proactive engagement absolutely strengthens partnerships. So I guess the question I always ask, just to finish off, You invest absolute months creating contracts with the legal, procurement, operations, internal, external partners, but how much time do you spend making sure they're actually delivering during their duration of the contract? And that's where compliance, I guess, turns effort into value. Thanks, James.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, really interesting. Apologies, I think I skipped ahead slightly when you were talking about some of the best practices a little bit earlier. So there's a bit of moving around slides, but I'm sure everybody has had a chance to kind of look at those. If anybody does want to see some of the slides, please let us know. Please get in touch, and we can. I'm sure the PRGX team will be happy to get in touch with you and share those slides directly. I love that analogy, Alan, and I think it speaks to everything you do with a car. You spend a lot of time invested in working out what car you want and where the details that you want to get out of it, and also like how much money you're going to spend on it, and then you buy it and you don't look at it for another for 3 years, depending on how old it is. I've only ever bought second-hand cars, so I just sort of run it until something goes wrong, and that's when you realize there's more to the car than meets the eye. And I think that exactly talks about some of the challenges in contract compliance. But I sort of think that brings us neatly on here to our resident practitioner, Keith, again. And Keith, I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey, the John Lewis journey, and all of this, and how you've kind of managed this. What, I guess, if you take a step back, and what were some of the challenges that the John Lewis partnership faced in kind of managing and your compliance around your contracts, and especially before you started engaging external support with the likes of PRGX?
Okay, thanks, James. First, I'd like to say, Alan, I agree with almost everything you said. I recognise almost everything you said, and some of the things that we identify, and the reasons why we go down a contract compliance route. But for me, contract compliance is contract performance. It is about how can you get the best performance out of the contract. And some of the challenges that John Lewis faces, we have thousands of contracts. We don't have thousands of contract managers. So we have a small number of contract managers with a lot of contracts to manage and to get the best performance out of. So they manage it on a BAU basis. They'll manage the SLAs and some of the basics, but they never get the opportunity, as Alan says, to lift the bonnet up and do a forensic audit. So there was clearly an opportunity there, but what would it deliver, and how would I get interest in the business? I'm always discussing with all of my contracts the service development side I mentioned earlier. And 4 years ago, I think it was, PRGX talked about contract compliance, and we could do this and we could do that. I was interested in then bringing the business to the conversation, and there was quite a lot of reluctance to that. So as ever, we'd nibble away at it. I'd make sure the business knew about this opportunity, and we had some success a couple of years ago in bringing the business there because we came up with some numbers. We came up with some speculative numbers, but numbers about what it might deliver. And then we sort of followed the process that Alan said, look at the more complex organizations with the greatest turnover and take a listing back into the business. We then followed a proof of concept. And before the proof of concept had completed, we already knew it was a good time to then start bringing on other projects. And so now we've got a number of waves. There's 3 projects per wave, and we've got quite a plan. But the hardest thing wasn't the common sense about why wouldn't you lift the bonnet up. It was internal stakeholder management to make sure it fitted the strategic need and the interests of stakeholders. And we are delivering on that now.
Yeah, that's often so much part of the challenge, right? The procurement faces is getting that internal buy-in to bring in some level of external expertise like that. Alan, is that something that you often have to kind of overcome when you come in as an external support team to showcase that value and unlock that kind of hidden grey margin as we sort of saw on that slide?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Keith's been a great ambassador, and we've involved as many stakeholders as we possibly can in the whole overview of the program, so they do get a good sight of what's happening and can be silent observers of the process and see where the benefits are coming through. Because as time goes on, they start seeing what we find under the bonnet. It really makes an impact.
Brilliant. And Keith, and I think we'll bring up that slide again, the same slide again here as well on this one, because I think there's a mention about strategic evolution there. And this is such an important part, again, of what procurement are doing right now. It is becoming strategic oversight kind of enablers as opposed to some, what they have been traditionally. And I think can you talk a little bit to sort of how your approach evolved into one of sort of that tactical spend review to more of a strategic lens and really drive kind of value from what you're doing here?
Yes, it was quite clear that with the thousands of contracts we have, there'll be numerous that would benefit from a forensic audit. But of course, you have to start small. You have to walk before you can run. You have to make sure you've got your stakeholders on board. So the proof of concept was about, yes, proving it to me, but to the business more generally. And then how quickly could we scale that up? We've now scaled it up, and I think we've got 17 that we've reviewed. 3 of them were not progressing. That was a no-go because we do have those. It doesn't mean every contract you look at are contracts to progress. But we've now got a number of waves, and we've got 17 that were progressing or about to progress. The important thing around the strategic approach then is getting the right beat rate. And the good thing about going to a third party is the capability and the resource is there to be able to deliver. And so what we're doing is making sure that the business understands more and more what contract compliance has to offer. And then we will build the program with them. Now, some of the good signals that we are building the right program, we've had 2 different contract managers come to us and say, oh, we've got this. I wonder if you can help. And so we're helping now, looking at them that we haven't done the analysis to go to the contract manager. They've come to us. That's always quite a good sign. But I still view what we're doing as evolving. We've now got a program. It's not quite strategic, but it's getting there. It will be strategic when we know whether it's a one-off piece of work, it's a cyclical piece of work, or even an annual piece of work. And there are certain contracts that will fit that. But first, we want to do the first contract compliance piece of work to understand that and to get at the internal interest and buy-in that it needs to be done at a set frequency, be that annual, bi-yearly or whenever. That's when it will be genuinely strategic and as we grow more and more out. But what's good about it, already there's plenty of read across. The business is talking more about grey margin. It's understanding more about how suppliers agree something with us, but actually they've also got their way of doing things. Labour rate build-up, for example, how they build that up versus how we expect and how the numbers will come across. So we're learning at each and every one, and the message is being spread not just by us, but by other contract managers as well.
Right, and I think that's so important, right? When procurement have people coming to them, and then contract managers have people coming to them, I think that shows that there's a clear acknowledgement and an awareness of the value that the procurement and contract team brings to the overall value of getting the most out of the contracts that you're working with. You talked there about, you're not quite there yet. There's a future ahead to look at and to become even more strategic, fully strategic, I suppose. You also mentioned earlier, I think that, you don't have hundreds of contract managers or thousands of contract managers for the thousands of contracts. So I guess as your expectations grow of what can be achieved in this area, how do you see technology, we'll come on to AI in a moment, how do you see technology like AI helping organizations kind of stay ahead, and particularly how it helps your organization stay ahead?
I think most of us would have had some experience of AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, or whatever it might be, and we can see and sense that this is a fantastic tool. But as with all tools, you need a craftsman to use that tool, to use it to its best effect. And I think that's where contract management comes in. We bring in specialists that have enhanced capability that can make use of the tools that perhaps we might be able to get access to, but would we be able to make good use of that? They'll have the resource in depth, so they'll have that skill in depth to be able then to use it to best effect. I think the most important skill, though, of everyone in the team is the people skills. It's still the ability to engage, to explain, to convince, to listen, and to problem solve. And I think that's just as important as whatever technology we have. We've got to have confidence in how that's being deployed and who's deploying it.
Absolutely, and we've talked so much on SIPS webinars this year about when and where to bring in AI, and I think it's so important to understand what exactly it is you're using it for, as opposed to bringing AI in for the sake of bringing AI in. And I'm sure, Amit, you will talk to that well in a moment. So I think we'll move on and talk about sort of the evolving role that AI is playing in contract management. We've got another poll for you. Just interested to see again that the kind of maturity levels of the audience here today. So please do select the response that best matches with your current situation. As a reminder, you should be able to answer just below me in the video player. Question is your organization using AI to strengthen supplier performance and relationships? So a few options there. Yes, we are effectively leveraging AI tools. We're in the exploratory stage of using AI in procurement. That could be anything from sort of using open source platforms to beginning to kind of look at some sort of specific solutions for what you're looking for. And C, I don't know how much automation is being used, to be honest. So, I mean, Keith, while we just wait for those responses, any quick sort of assessment of where your team is at on the journey?
Well, we're again in two. We're definitely exploring. And we are using effectively leveraging. Well, the AI tool itself keeps evolving. So you're having to relearn or understand how you can better use it. And quite frankly, this is why we go to market. We are using PRGX because they can keep at the forefront of AI and all the sort of tools that are emerging and make best use of them as experts in that field. And we can leverage it through the relationship with them. We have enough to do with AI and its capability in our core business of retailing, customer attraction, and all that sort of good stuff. So we want to make sure that it's an informed, educated conversation that we have, but we absolutely expect our supplier to be at the forefront of AI and the tools and using it as effectively as possible.
Fantastic. And just the results coming in here, and please do keep sending them in, but thank you to all those who've responded. 59% match you again, Keith. I think, Keith, you're speaking as an audience member today. You're kind of matching the sentiments of the audience. 59%, we are in this exploratory stage of using AI in procurement. And the remaining 40%, I don't really know how much automation is being used in the department. So nobody feels like they're kind of effectively leveraging AI tools. And I'm sure that is probably a sentiment that's shared across many businesses at the moment. On that note, Amit, I'm going to pass over to you. I know you've got sort of some insights to share around the role of AI in contract management. So I'll pass over to you to bring up some of the slides and talk us through those.
Yeah, thanks, James. So I think, as Alan mentioned, the contract ecosystem is quite complex, right? There are multiple versions of contracts that exist in your SharePoint or in your CLM system, right? There is a hierarchy of contract documents that somebody has to stitch together. And then you have to read these contracts to really understand how a particular clause has evolved over a period of time. And these are all activities that perhaps AI can help. And we actually built a tool called Contract Insights with that intention, is to take away some of the grunt work, some of the manual work that AI can solve, and then let people like Alan and Keith focus on the actual expertise on the contract reviews and finding those overpayment opportunities. So moving on to the actual tool, what you see on the screen is kind of like almost an interface that you log into. It's a tool that is built with secure technology. So we get contracts, we store those in a secure way, and then we extract hundreds of clauses from those contracts, right? The tool is capable of ingesting tens and thousands of contracts together. And we focus on, when we extract clauses from the contracts, we focus on three main types of clauses: your pricing, your cost clauses, your risk clauses, and your performance clauses, right? And that's where that 105 number comes from. And then we kind of allow our auditors to search, tag, and filter those extractions. If AI has done a mistake, they can go and correct those clause extractions, as you can see on the top, where they can just drag it and kind of let AI learn. And that's the beauty about AI tools, is these tools can learn over a period of time, right? So they may not be accurate in the first go, but as they get more and more feedback, they start learning and getting better. And that's kind of what our intention was when we built Contract Insights, and that's come a long way since in our journey. And finally, we actually connect all the contract documents in a hierarchy. So I'm going to actually talk about the 7 steps that actually built into Contract Insights, from the inception of contracts to ultimately providing something tangible to people like Alan, that they can start looking at the contracts from a compliance perspective. So we call this the 7 steps of Contract Insights. The first one is the contract upload, right? We get a large amount of contracts. I mentioned tens and thousands of contracts. And we start organizing these contracts by suppliers. So you automatically get the output in a supplier view inside Contract Insights. The next one is we deduplicate the contracts. And this is probably a very familiar problem to many of you, where if you have contracts kept on your SharePoint or in your CLM, in many cases, there are multiple versions that exist, right? But for you to really understand and start the compliance process, you need to eliminate some of the duplicated versions of the contracts. So we have used AI technology that basically looks at all these versions and tries to understand which one is the latest version, which one is the signed version, and it keeps those versions and removes the other versions from an compliance analytics perspective. Then we go into the extraction process. We take the contracts, we have models trained that actually look at various clauses and extract those. And when we have these extractions, and that's where the advancement of AI technology is helping us, is the clauses, we don't look at keywords and don't look at the actual structure of the clauses. We look at the semantic meaning of the clauses in extracting those clauses, right? So a pricing clause may look completely different between 2 contracts, but as long as how humans understand that this is pricing semantically, the AI models are trained to understand that, and they extract that information. One of the notorious problems of extracting information from contracts is the tabular data, right? The tables are extremely notorious because the tables can span multiple pages. You have tables that within tables, you have tables with blank rows, blank columns, right? So they exist in all structures. And historically, understanding the commercial clauses, they typically come in tabular format, is quite hard. People have to really scroll multiple pages, jot down the information, take notes. So we have built this AI module which allows you to extract this tabular data at a click of button. So the AI models are trained to understand the tables, and they can detect it and be able to download those tables quickly into your spreadsheet software. And that basically really accelerates your audit process. So once we do that, the next item that we need to do is understand the kind of how a particular clause has evolved. So when people like Alan and his team go into compliance process, they have to make sure that the invoices match in the time period of the clause, right? So if there is a clause that existed in your SOW and amendments happened over a period of time, you need to understand the source of truth at the point of the invoice date, right? So you to build that temporal hierarchy, we have built a contract hierarchy module within Contract Insights, which allows you to take all your contracts and put them in a hierarchical view. And this allows you to stitch the evolution of a clause over a period of time. This particular feature then can be also used to construct your kind of final source of truth for any kind of advanced analytics on the contracts. And once you have large number of contracts ingested with various suppliers, you want to understand how these suppliers vary over a period of time, right? So you want to assign spend categories like technology, transportation, and storage, warehouse, right, to your contract. So there are various schemas that exist. UNSPSC is one a lot of people use. We have configured a schema that basically we use to assign the actual categories to the suppliers. And this helps you to just basically keep a track of all your contracts. And many of the CLMs out there in the market have some of these features. The what we have seen is the gap typically exists when with the assignment it's either manual, where then people typically don't do that, or when it's AI generated, it's not always good. And we're taken care that the AI model that we have does a good job with that. And finally, we bring all of this together, right? So now you have your documents, they are organized in a hierarchy, and you kind of like understood your evolution of a clause over a period of time. So we have the AI model that summarizes your clause as it appears, as it evolves over a period of time. And then we extract various attributes from the contracts, 24 to be precise. And then based on the past data, we have understood the relationship between these attributes and overpayments, right? To give you an example, concrete example, historically people looked at from on the compliance perspective purely using spend as a lever, right? So they would typically look at suppliers and say, well, these suppliers have very high spend. Let's start looking at their contracts one by one. So and then they would spend time looking at the contracts, only to realize that there is not much opportunity in those contracts. And the reason could be that, well, the spend is high, but most of the pricing with that supplier is lump sum pricing, right? When you have a lump sum pricing, the chance of overpayment is quite low. Whereas a supplier that may have a lower spend, but maybe the pricing scheme is cost plus pricing, right? And in that case, there is a higher chance that overpayments can happen. And so what we have done is we have learned those attributes and opportunities that could exist because of the presence or absence of those attributes. And the model basically takes that historical learning and applies to all future contracts. And this allows us to create these auditor queues for focusing on the most important opportunistic contracts, right? So we can kind of like eliminate just the focus on spend and combine the spend with the actual information inside of the contracts. This is where AI can help. If a human has to do it, they have to go through each of those contracts line by line and really understand that. But AI can really help you accelerate and gain efficiencies from that. So that's kind of like what contract insights in a nutshell. I think as with the evolution of AI, the tool is maturing, and we are seeing great benefits for that tool within PRGX. James?
Fantastic. Thank you, Amit. Really, really useful to get some of those kind of step-by-step explanations. And I'm just going to stay with you for a moment because we've had a couple of questions on this already. And there's a question around what is the difference between just being able to use a general purpose AI compared to something that has been, I guess, custom built for this approach? I guess there's a sort of question there around, is it best to kind of get into the purpose built stuff, or what's the difference between the two of them?
That's a good question, and I'm going to steal Alan's analogy of the car, right? So general purpose AI, right? Like think about in the common tools that you use. I think some of the tools that Keith mentioned as well, they are built with the general purpose audience in mindset, right? So I kind of like use the analogy of Swiss Army knife. So Swiss Army knife is equivalent to the general purpose tool. So of course you want to use Swiss Army knife when there is a need, but you won't use Swiss Army knife to make routine fixes to your car, right? For making routine fixes to your car engine, you require specific tools for that. And that's the difference between Contract Insights, which is tailored specifically for contract evaluation, contract compliance analytics, and something like general purpose software like that are out there.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, look, I kind of naturally moved into it here, but we're now kind of on that Q&A portion. We've already had a few questions come in, so thank you everyone for sending those in already. As a reminder, just pop your question in that Q&A box below me in the video player. Look, there's a question. I'm going to stick with you, Amit. So we just because we're on this AI subject, and we've had a question from Alejandra. Thank you for the presentation. Can Contract Insights distill the SOW or spec section of past contracts to summarize the provision requirements to date? For example, can your tool spot where spend is going out of that contract, and how long does it take for the tool to record or analyze and recommend actions for one single contract?
Yeah, I think That's a good question. And if we go back to the seventh step, the slide, 20th slide, I think, and there is a thing called clause summarizer, which is exactly what it does. It takes basically a particular clause and understand either within a document or over a period of time and summarize that and provide that information to our auditors in a structured way. Now, how long it takes, I think that's a little bit hard to answer because it depends on how big is your contract, the complexity of the contract, how many terms that exist in the contract. So, but we have seen that in most cases, we have been able to process thousands of contracts. Actually, we got from one of our clients, in a week. So it's the tool is extremely fast.
Fantastic. And final question from Alejandro. I wanted to split it up slightly, but can the analysis be tailored to the organization's policies or the kind of public regulations that it has to follow?
That's a good question. That feature we don't have at this point in the tool, where we take some of the external data sets like the current legislation and so on and compare against that. But that's something we can think about in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alejandro. Great question. Put Amit on his toes, kept him on his toes there. Thank you. A couple more questions that have come in. One from Zoe, and maybe I'll come to you, Alan, on this one, and maybe you, Keith, to sort of follow it up as well. So, Alan, please could you provide examples of KPIs that could be used to track compliance beyond the typical spend or volume or quality?
So I guess it depends what contract you're looking at, James, to be honest. There's a lot of KPIs out there we'll come across. I guess one of the challenges that we often find in contracts is sometimes the KPIs that are in there are overly complex and are very difficult to track and keep control of. So, when we go to do our audits and say, can you provide the data, do this KPI and check how it's performed over time? Yeah, that's really a challenge, and people don't quite know how they perform it. It's very manual. It's a lot of data that's not really stored away in a really concise way. So, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes the KPIs are really challenging, and I guess the big challenge in a contract when we look at KPIs and make them really measurable is what do you want to achieve from that KPI? What is the intention? What do you want to measure, and what do you want to judge their performance on? Somewhat typical, it's on obviously your open book and your warehousing about pick rates and the like, or on labor rate, temporary agency providers, how many turnover of staff and how retention is, and all those kind of checks you can do in KPIs. They're all pretty good, and they're all kind of measurable, but often I think take a step back, look at your KPI, decide what you really want to check, what you want to monitor, and what you want to judge their performance on it, and then work out exactly how they're going to do it and what data they're going to retain to provide that kind of level of insight.
Interesting, thank you. And Keith, I suppose this starts from the point that you kind of negotiating the contract or renegotiating the contract, understanding the KPIs that you're putting in, and knowing how you're going to try and track those. Is that something you have to consider quite carefully?
Yeah, that's again comes to the performance of the contract. I look after inventory integrity services, and so precision and accuracy is a KPI. We would then look at, well, how would we measure that, monitor that, and share that fairly, and how would we track and understand it? But as Alan suggests as well, there are other things and component parts around. So staff turnover is a great one, because if you have higher staff turnover than expected, well, you've got all those sort of new starter type costs that were built in as well. If it's lower, well, perhaps the forecast or expectation means that the spend is lower and there's a rebate due. So really interesting to look at the mechanics and look at what AI has to offer in the forensic analysis, not necessarily just the day-to-day BAU operation of the contract.
And Keith, from your experience, you mentioned rebates there as potentially one of the things that you've uncovered. Are there any things specifically you can point to that you don't have to go into the full details, of course, I understand that, but anything like rebates or things like that you've kind of spotted that that grey area that others might kind of be missing as well?
Yeah, the grey area can be in the interpretation of a contract. So management fee, and where management fee may or may not be applied. And it's not a surprise that the supplier versus the customer may have a different view on some parts of that contract. And we've had management fee retrospective payments, or if we can't necessarily get the retrospective payment, we can sort it out for this year and for future years as well. Don't expect in contract compliance to be able to necessarily get redress about all the things that you find historically, but you have every opportunity to change it for the future. And I think that's the power of contract compliance as well.
Yeah, and being more strategic about your future relationship and your future kind of contract KPIs, right? I think that's really important. I had some great questions here, and a few to directly towards the PRGX tools. So I'm going to push the final poll to you now, and we won't necessarily read the results out of this, but it's just if anyone would like to kind of find out more from PRGX about the PRGX, sorry, about the tool, about what they can do for supply contract management, let us know. There's just a yes or a maybe option up there. So it just help kind of them in any follow-ups, and it will kind of help prioritize for anyone who would be interested. So do let us know if that is you guys. I'll carry on with the questions. We've got a great question from Derry. Alan, I'll come to you on this one. It might be a question for Amit. Feel free to pass it on, but can you set pre-requirements of the tool to outline problematic terms or company red lines in contracts?
So I'll take it from an operational point of view, and Amit can obviously take it from the kind of the AI point of view. So when I look at the output of what we're seeing in contract insights, it really lets us to see key clauses and where key clauses don't exist, and do that comparison across huge amounts of contracts. Allows us to drill deep and look at clauses. So yes, it does allow us to do that kind of analysis and really pull out where there's gaps, there's missing information. Say, for instance, you may have a 1,000 contracts of which 800 may have an order clause, and they may have a data retention clause, and we can tell you which ones don't have the order clause and the data retention clauses by doing that analysis across the whole contract piece. So yeah, in short, I guess it does. Amit, from your point of view and the technical side, would you like to share a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the tool has pre-configured models for about 100 plus 105 clauses at this point. And if you're in a niche industry and perhaps there is a specific clause that you care about, there is always a provision to add that particular clause. We just need to train a model for that. And that's typically, we can do it in a matter of weeks. So it's always possible to add new clauses, introduce new clauses, and we have evolved this kind of like clause list over a period of time anyways.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I hope that answers your question there, Derry. Another question here, I think, around the kind of missed opportunities, and Alan, I'll come to you on this one because you mentioned about renegotiating supply contracts so important, and we've talked a little bit more about it since. But what do you feel are the kind of biggest missed opportunities, or the biggest missed opportunity companies face when kind of renegotiating supply contracts?
That's a good question. I guess, yeah, I guess when you go into a renegotiation, the biggest missed opportunity is possible having, I see, going without a position of knowledge, without truly understanding how the previous contract has performed. So you start to negotiate going forward with future terms, but you've ignored the wealth of insight to kind of the historical compliance data. So I think past performance tells a really powerful story. You can see exactly what the missed rebates, the pricing discrepancies, the scope creep, the service gaps. They just aren't lessons. I guess they can use this leverage for future contracts as well to help generate better terms, and also reveal kind of good patterns and strengthen negotiation stances. And as I think Keith mentioned very briefly before, retrospective recovery can sometimes prove difficult, but don't walk away empty-handed. You can use that kind of knowledge to ensure that you can get that margin that you've lost historically somehow put into your new contract during the renegotiation process. It's excellent leverage. And I guess that's how you turn that kind of those missed opportunities into kind of some measurable gains going forward as well, James.
Brilliant. And Keith, I don't know if you can talk from a kind of practitioner's view on that. How has your kind of the way you've approached renegotiating contracts changed since you've been getting greater analysis over your kind of contract performance with PRGX?
Well, there's no doubt about it that one of the best times to do a forensic audit is just prior to a renegotiation. So you absolutely understand the performance of the contract and the areas of potential grey margin or areas you'd like to tighten up, any areas of misunderstanding or not the best alignment, so an element of misalignment. We've certainly seen that in some of our contracts. We also have, though, when we're talking to people, they say, oh, when's the best time to do contract compliance? Well, now is good, quite frankly. And it may be that you're at the start of a contract, but you're not too sure how well understood it is, how that's going to hit the ground. It might be a midpoint, or indeed, as I mentioned earlier, you might be coming to the end of it. If you've never done it, do it now, and then work out what the frequency might be in the future. Back to you, James.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I sort of recall your message earlier. Contract compliance is contract performance. I think that really adds to that response. Amit, a question from Larissa. Would this tool being discussed cover the legal aspects of terms and conditions, for example, jurisdiction, governing law, indemnities, liabilities, that kind of thing?
Yes, at this point, we focus on three main categories of clauses. Our main focus is the commercial clauses because that's what compliance is. We try to basically find overpayment by looking at commercial clauses, but we do also cover the legal clauses, so legal aspects, some of the ones that you mentioned, and also performance clauses in terms of SLAs and additional terms around that.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm going to come to the final question now. I'm going to put it to you, Keith, before I ask Alan to kind of summarize. So, Keith, you've heard a little bit about Amit, talking about the how AI is going to kind of support in contract performance management and that kind of thing from going forward. Where do you, as watching that and listening to that, feel it will best help you and best make the biggest impact on your kind of supply contract performance and compliance today?
There's no doubt that we need to have good conversations internally with PRGX and to let others understand the opportunity of working with a company like PRGX with the capability that they now have, but the capability that will grow. I love some of the questions we've had. Does it do this? Does it do that? Does it do the other? It's probably either doing it or it's on the wish list. And so we all need to sort of wake up to the opportunity of improving the performance of all our contracts through an element of contract compliance, but also think very carefully that the tool itself won't do it. It still needs to be driven. It's a bit like driverless cars. There's never a driverless car at the moment. We still want a human there to steer it. We're very much in that steering phase. We need to be very engaged with Amit and others to understand what AI could do, and let's take that conversation forward. So start talking would be my encouragement to everyone on the call.
Absolutely. Keep on probing with these questions in whether it be in SIPS webinars, whether it's training courses, whether you're speaking directly to vendors like PRGX. I think it's really important to keep asking these questions because everybody, as we saw from the results of the poll earlier, everybody's at a kind of exploratory stage at this. So no question is a stupid one, I think, at this point in time. So absolutely. So Alan, look, I'm going to come to you one more time to finish the session off, summarize, if you will. And I think we've got a final slide we can bring up to kind of help you do so. What are the key messages for you? What are the takeaways that the audience should be thinking about from this session today?
Yeah, thanks, James. Now that's perfect. So yeah, I guess I really hope today's content and the discussion have been useful, insightful, thought-provoking. And as you think about getting, I guess, most out of the supply contracts, I guess the first thing I would take away is remember that contract compliance is just the start. It's, I guess, to summarize, compliance is your retroactive check, the financial mechanic, lifting that bonnet to make sure the contract is performing as intended. Then you got optimization. It moves you into that proactive stance, using insights from across your contracts to negotiate the best terms, not just for the high performing deals, I guess, but across the whole entire portfolio. And then the process doesn't stop. Continuous monitoring is your regular servicing, keeping contracts finely tuned so they deliver consistently and old issues don't creep back in. And I guess that's how the PRGX suite of contract management is being seen, the three pillars here, that delivers the maximum value to all our partners. I mean, personally, I'm incredibly proud of the whole team and the work that we do. And I think the combination of the The deep expertise, the cutting edge technology truly sets what we do apart, and also helping our clients achieve that best in class contracts and unlock maximum value as well.
Thank you. I won't sort of add any summary to that. All I'm going to say is every time I look at a car now, I'm going to see a contract. And I think every time I look at a contract, I'm going to think about a car. So thank you for the analogy. It's going to stick with lots of us, I think. Look, thank you all. Thanks for all the time. Thanks for all the questions everybody has sent in today. Thank you for those who've engaged with the polls. As I said, it really helps us kind of personalize the webinars a little bit more to what kind of maturity level you're at the moment. Keep the conversation going. Keep the conversation going. Ask more questions to PRGX, or get in touch with Keith if you want to know more about the John Lewis journey. Equally, the SIPS community platform is there if you want to kind of discuss with other SIPS members in your peer group. A big thank you to the team at PRGX for sponsoring today's session and making webinars like this possible. And of course, to our speakers, Alan, Amit and Keith. Look, I really enjoyed that conversation. So thank you all for joining us today. Before I go, worth noting, there is a report from the PRGX team now available on SIPS Download. So do check that out while you're here with us today. It's all about contract management and compliance again. So there's a nice step-by-step kind of guide there. So we'll pop a link through on the page now. I also wanted to raise your attention to some more webinars we've got. We've got loads coming up over the next month or so. The next Tuesday, we're going to hear about how modern payment solutions can help address common procurement pain points. While on Thursday, I'll be back as we look to cover the kind of everyday risk picture. Contracts, I'm sure, will come up in that as well, supplier management as well. But why we shouldn't be overlooking those common risks as opposed to maybe the macro, cutting through the noise of the geopolitical and the tariff escalations that we've talked a lot about on webinars this year as well. Finally, as a reminder, you're going to receive a follow-up email from this webinar afterwards. So do share with your friends and colleagues if you feel like they might find it interesting as well or useful. I'm sure they will. So please do feel free to share that link. That will allow them to watch back on demand. But look, that is everything from me today. That's everything from us. Thank you on behalf of all of our speakers. Thank you from PRGX and SIPS Download. I look forward to seeing you again soon for another webinar. Thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day.